What's up, brownies? Before I do anything else, I do want to remind people that I started the Pretty Brown Rise website and the different tribes or groups in an effort to provide a safe space for people to talk about some of the issues that they're having. And the situation with Drew and her sister Allison and some of the things that they're going through really wanted me to remind you all. I know I'm a small creator and I don't have a big following, but the website is there if we want to start using it. I had already made groups for depression and anxiety and the neurodivergent based on my own personal issues. And one thing that I'm trying to do in this video is not let my own personal issues interfere with what I want to talk about, which is how we can help each other learn from different situations that we see happening on television versus just gossiping about people's personal lives. I want to express my condolences to their family for losing their dad recently to Alzheimer's. As some of you may know, I literally just went through that this summer, and watching him die that slow, agonizing death like that, I know that pain. And so I wanted to start the video with that and then try to move on. Okay, so this video is about Drew, but we must realize that there is no Drew without Allison. Allison is a big sister. There's a 20-something year age gap, and no, she is not Drew's mother. However, that mother-daughter dynamic that we see between them is because Drew wanted to get in the industry. Her mom took her to LA to live with her sister, and Allison used her connections to get Drew's foot in the door and to get her all of the extra training, which there's nothing wrong with that. But what we must realize is, whereas Drew is without a doubt beautiful and talented, that leg up that she had is what made the difference between her actually being a star or just being another dime a dozen beautiful, talented person in Hollywood that never got to make it. We must acknowledge the large role that Allison played in Drew's success. But to be fair, Allison also played a large role in Drew's storyline. So it is fair to say that Drew used Allison as a storyline if you consider it from this angle. Allison is neither main cast nor a friend of, and yet and still we saw her more than we saw Moneta. She got to have half an episode basically dedicated to her. She hosted an event, the reason for that retreat, which was the whole mental health thing. And this concern that we all of a sudden have for Allison's mental health and who made fun of it and so forth and so on. What you must know is, Drew, I'm going to have to call you to the carpet on this one. You didn't seem to be concerned about Allison's mental health when you let your husband make the decision to block your sister from coming into your house. You also didn't address this when he mentioned at part 2 of the reunion when you said, you prevented my sister from coming in our home. He said your whole family, everybody blocked Allison. Y'all didn't circle back around that or explain that. And because I know that she's on her healing journey still, I'm not going to touch that sore spot. Just know that I caught it. Another thing is, you didn't think about, for somebody that's already dealing with depression and anxiety and how you need that love and support, how is it going to affect her depression to not only be able to not see her sister, who's like a daughter to her, but also to be blocked from her niece and nephews? The concern for your sister's mental health seemed to have an uptick at the point that you needed her back in your life and back in the house to use her against Ralph. And that's your husband. We talked about Ralph using Courtney as a pawn. You use your sister in the same way. To say all of the things to your husband that you didn't want to catch the flack for saying. In the same way that you all have said that about Candy and the Candy Coated Clique and her family. So if we point it out when it's happening with other people, we got to point it out with you too, sis. And actually, that topic is a great way to segue into the next thing that I want to say. I'm not a fan of Ralph, but one thing that I have to do is be fair and balanced on this channel. Balance equals righteousness, and anything that lacks balance will inevitably lead to chaos. What you see in your marriage right now is chaos. And you have to acknowledge that family interference aspect of that. Your first season on here, we saw your mama in the house, Bible thumping and interfering and interjecting in your marriage when she was supposed to be there to help take care of you or the kids or help out around the house due to your injury. And so now we see your sister is there. By Allison's own admission, what she said in a previous interview is, see, the reason why Ralph doesn't like me is because I was, way back when they got started in Chicago, I was over there all the time, and I used to call him out for the stuff that he was doing. Now these people have moved to a whole different state, a whole different part of the country, and here you are still here in their house, showing up to the point that you had to be banned from coming over there. And I don't think it was just because of your mental health. Something very weird was stated on the reunion when Ralph said, when Drew said, "You kicked my sister out of the house." He said, "Drew, your whole family distanced themselves from Allison." There was no pushback on that. Maybe they edited it out, but it led me to believe that it was a little bit something more going on there. But either way, when you get married, you have to leave and cleave. That is imperative. When this situation was going on with Candy, everybody was dragging her for being too attached to her mom and all of this other stuff. I don't know why people can't see it as it pertains to Drew. This whole Ralph is just a bad guy with no redeemable qualities. Is he a liar and a manipulator and all of that other stuff? Yes, he is. But also, Drew, so are you. And just as Allison was careful to say, "Oh yeah, Ralph got money," she also said in an interview, she tried to allude to the fact that it was Drew that was upgrading Ralph and he was still trying to figure it out when they first met. Okay. We don't have any proof of you having a wonderful, fabulous lifestyle and being super rich before you met Ralph. Pause. This is what I'm saying right here. What we've learned is how many people are coming out talking about y'all think that these actors are rich, but we really don't make all that much money, especially if you're black. And then these residual checks can sometimes be like 32 cents. Let's not assume. Look at Drew's IMDb. And actually, it was only 3 episodes of the game, according to IMDb. Let's not assume that she was just rich and balling out of control. One of the things that I noticed in a recent interview, just like Drew, y'all can't tell us what Ralph does for a living, but what you can do is you make a point to say that he makes a lot of money doing it. Why is that important? See, you know that y'all can hurl every type of insult that you possibly can think of at Ralph and make him sound like a bad guy. You just can't make him sound like a broke guy, because that's not going to play well for Drew in court. Not only can Drew end up not getting spousal support or child support, but she can actually end up owing Ralph that. That is very clever and strategic on Drew and Allison's part. The thing about Ralph that we cannot take away from him is that he was a fine, and we ain't going to take that from him. That man is fine. And he's a high income earner now, for sure, according to all of you. And also, he didn't have any children. And he did step in to play that role of stepfather after you had been jilted. Drew was perfectly okay and fine to be with her fiance at the time while he was securing the bag from, the music industry legally, and then also from the illegal activity. But what we don't talk about is the fact that that man dropped you like a hot potato and said that instead of getting married, while y'all were in the planning phase and all of this stuff, instead of getting married, he wanted to be single. He left you high and dry with a baby, and then he ended up going to prison. You came with a lot of baggage for somebody like Ralph, who we can't find any evidence of him having any. We have to give that man credit for stepping in the way he did with that fatherhood role. It's a lot of men out here that don't want to take care of their own kids, much less are they going to step in and take care of someone else's. And about that, you are forcing this issue as it pertains to the adoption. You've already changed the young man's last name. So he already has the same last name as the rest of the family. Pause. To be clear, what I'm saying is, although Courtney was trash for some of the other stuff she said around it, let's go to the nugget of truth in the whole. Why are we still forcing this adoption if we're not trying to form some sort of safety net for a potential money grab in case of divorce as far as it pertains to child support? Think about how that would have worked out for Mike if Eva wasn't making more money than him now. And also, you talk about stepping in and being a real man and the bigger man. Ralph didn't have his own father in his life. You know that this is a hot button for him, and you play with that. So for him to not try to overstep as a stepfather, respecting that role, trying to foster a relationship with the biological father, and then respect that man's wishes as far as the adoption and everything like that, I don't think that Ralph is doing anything wrong in that aspect. I just don't. Children tend to be a bit more honest. Children will tell all. The fact that Josiah is so attached to Ralph and so happy and loved that boy didn't even have no interest in meeting his biological father. That is a well-loved and well taken care of young man. And we have no evidence to the contrary. In fact, we don't have any evidence of Ralph not being a great dad. It was very telling when he said, I want to make sure that there's an accurate representation of me to my children. What that sounds like is that's probably something that he's caught you doing in the past. Also, with the aspect of therapy. In the beginning, Ralph being into the therapy, taking the notes, and actually putting it into action. We saw him try to do the date nights and go above and beyond with you seasons ago. And for you to crap all over it, ruin the evening, and be very ungrateful and continue to pick at him when he's trying to heal and move forward. What we're starting to see is a pattern of you with this picking at people's pain points, triggering and re-traumatizing people, and a lack of gratitude. You did that with your sister and her mental health and not considering that when you wanted to use her as a pawn. You did that with Ralph and fatherlessness and not acknowledging the role that he played as the stepfather and being really ungrateful by the way you're going about picking at certain aspects of his fatherhood journey. Speaking of being ungrateful and re-traumatization and triggering and all of that, let's talk about that because that's exactly what you did to Candy. It's just that nobody is calling you out for it, but you owe Candy an apology, and I'm going to explain to you all why. First and foremost, this whole, well, it's below my day rate and what I usually get paid. And like you did Candy and Todd such a favor by doing their movie when they have been real friends to you and Ralph. How you try to make it seem like it's just so far beneath you. But girl, I pulled your IMDb for the past 10 years. That's not impressive. You're not booked and busy, and you didn't agree to what they were paying you. You shouldn't have accepted that low pay to do a favor for a friend. But you can't accept it on the front end and then try to trash them about it on the back end. And another thing about this whole triggering people and re-traumatizing them, Drew took a page out of the Portia playbook. And instead of admitting to the world that she was bisexual, she tried to insinuate that Candy was the reason why she fell over into this, or that Candy wanted to do something with her sexually. And that's why they were casting her for the movie. Portia tried this same thing a few years ago, and that ended up having Candy being called Bill Cosby. That could have ruined her reputation, if not her freedom, if nobody came clean and proved that that wasn't true. And all of this goes back to internalized homophobia. Both Drew and Portia have proven themselves to be homophobic. As a matter of fact, most closeted people are the most homophobic, gay-bashing people ever. We just don't call them out for it. But that's exactly what's happening here. You would rather blame somebody else than admit your sexuality. You're trying to blame Candy, saying, oh, well, maybe, I wouldn't have done this if we wouldn't have met in Candy's movie. Baby, you've been into girls, just like Portia. But you threw her under the bus in order to hide behind her and save your own behind. Not only was it homophobic, but you owe Candy an apology. You owe her several. See, I know what y'all getting ready to say. Well, see, the black community or the black church is homophobic, and that's why people have to keep their life a secret, and that's why they in the closet lying. See, one of the other things that I noticed that you and Portia have in common is that y'all both came on the scene as holy rollers and always talking about God. It just turns out that y'all lifestyle didn't match up with that. See, because the church also frowns upon adultery, but that didn't stop you or Ralph, now did it? Another thing that the church frowns upon is having kids out of wedlock, and it didn't stop you with that either, now did it? See, one thing that the church will always do, though, that I notice is that they will be pro-man at the expense of being anti-woman, because they will always blame a woman for a man's shortcomings or a man not being able to control himself. He's so easily forgiven for anything that he does, and even a righteous man will fall 7 times and all of this. But see, this is one of the things that you did in being homophobic, anti-woman, and pro-man all in the same thing. And that's with how you treated LaToya. See, you used the whole thing with Prophet Lot to slut shame LaToya instead of holding him accountable. You went on talking about how she got a Delilah spirit and a Jezebel spirit and everything else, instead of admitting the fact that that man is supposed to be a man of God and he should have been worried about his family and fiance and everything else. But instead of prophesizing, he was womanizing. That was more so on him than her. But let's move on. Strange relationship with the truth and holding other people accountable, but not yourself. So as it pertains to Courtney, she used the B word like it's such a big deal and like it's not something that all of you do. But she said that she didn't, and she did, and you all dragged that out, right? But how about that situation with Marlo where you used the word incident because you said, as somebody that's from Chicago, we don't want to glorify violence or we don't want to be promoting it to children. That's why we don't use the S word, right? Okay, but riddle me this, Drew. How come it is that every time you get mad at somebody enough to where you're willing to fight them, whether it's Marlo or Courtney or LaToya, the first thing that you holler is what? I'm from Chicago, B word. That's what you do. Once again, you ready to fight women where you were ready to make excuses for Ralph and his behavior. Do you see a pattern of behavior as it pertains to you? Now, I can point out a lot more examples and give Drew a lot more smoke, but I'm not going to. And here's why. First of all, she's a black woman. Secondly, she's crazy, beautiful, and talented, and so is her sister, and I love the both of them, and I am rooting for them. But most importantly, I am rooting against Ralph. He is every bit of the liar and the gaslighter and the cheater and everything else that you accuse him of, including using Courtney as a pawn and the part that she played in it. And as much as I can't stand Ralph, I can't stand Courtney. And here's why. That heifer sat on that stage and said those disgusting things about, yeah, I knew the mic was on when I said it. If I done told y'all once, I done told y'all 100 times. Minor children need to be off the table. And they have no respect, especially that Courtney. And you know why? Because I think that she on some talented Mr. Ripley type of stuff to where she trying to get Drew out of the way because she wants Drew's life. And that is why I have a whole separate video of smoke for the talentless Miss Rhodes. And her and Ralph really gonna get the smoke in that video. But for right now, Drew, we need for you to tighten up and get your head in the game.